The staccato rhythm of my heels against the marble floor echoed through the cavernous foyer, each step a tiny rebellion against the silence that ruled Vittorio Ricci's mansion. I kept my eyes down, counting the veins in the polished stone beneath me, anything to avoid meeting the gazes of the security personnel stationed at every corner. They never looked directly at me anyway. To them, I was just another piece of furniture, another service worker who moved through these halls like a ghost. "More starch next time, Elena." Mrs. Petrov, the head housekeeper, had scolded me that morning, pinching the collar of one of Mr. Ricci's Egyptian cotton shirts between her bony fingers. "And be careful with the cufflinks. The sapphire set went missing last week." The accusation hung in the air between us, unspoken but clear. I wanted to tell her that I'd never steal, that my mother had raised me better than that, even after she was gone, but I needed this job more than I needed dignity. My father's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and being a live-in maid for one of Boston's most feared men came with benefits, health insurance being the most important one. The scent of lemon polish and leather permeated the west wing as I pushed my cleaning cart toward the study. Mr. Ricci was supposed to be out until evening, a rare opportunity to thoroughly clean his private spaces without his intimidating presence. I'd been working here for 3 months, and I'd only glimpsed him a handful of times, usually from a distance, a dark silhouette moving from car to doorway, always surrounded by men in suits who never seemed to blink. I paused outside his study door, listening for any sounds within. Silence. I entered my access code, a luxury afforded to few staff members, and pushed the heavy oak door open. The room smelled of expensive cologne and aged whiskey, a heady combination that made my head swim slightly. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. I moved to the windows first, spraying and wiping the glass until it was invisible. My reflection stared back at me, dark circles under eyes the color of honey, brown hair pulled back in a severe bun, the plain black uniform that made me fade into the background. 25 years old and already disappearing. I worked methodically around the room, dusting leather-bound books, polishing the mahogany desk, and vacuuming the Persian rug. The minutes ticked by on the antique grandfather clock in the corner, each swing of the pendulum reminding me that my time alone in this sanctuary of power was limited. When I reached his desk, I hesitated. We were strictly forbidden from touching Mr. Ricci's papers, even to straighten them, Mrs. Petrov had warned. But several documents had fallen to the floor, and a glass with amber liquid residue sat dangerously close to what looked like important contracts. I carefully moved the glass, wiping the ring of moisture it had left behind. As I bent to collect the papers, a name caught my eye. Cardelli, my father's cardiologist. I froze, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. I shouldn't read this. I knew I shouldn't, but my eyes were already scanning the document, a list of names with numbers beside them. Enormous numbers. My father's name was there too, with a figure that made my stomach drop. The sudden sound of voices in the hallway sent a jolt of panic through me. I quickly gathered the papers, trying to arrange them exactly as they had been. But in my haste, I knocked over the glass, sending whiskey splashing across the desk and onto the front of my uniform. "Shit!" I hissed, frantically dabbing at the liquid with my cleaning cloth. The voices grew louder, and I recognized one of them, the low, resonant tone that could only belong to Vittorio Ricci himself. My hands shook as I tried to clean up the mess, but it was too late. The study door swung open. Time seemed to slow as he entered. In person, he was even more imposing than the glimpses I'd caught. Tall and broad-shouldered, he filled the doorway with his presence. Black hair, slightly graying at the temples, was swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and cold symmetry. But it was his eyes that held me frozen in place, dark as midnight and just as fathomless. Behind him stood 2 of his ever-present guards, and a man I'd never seen before, thin and nervous-looking, clutching a briefcase to his chest like a shield. Mr. Ricci's gaze moved from my face to the wet documents on his desk, then to the empty glass in my hand. His expression remained perfectly neutral, which somehow terrified me more than anger would have. "Sir, I'm so sorry," I stammered, my voice barely audible. "I was just cleaning and—" "Leave us," he said, not to me, but to his companions. The nervous man looked relieved, but the guards hesitated. "Now," Mr. Ricci added, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable edge. The men retreated, closing the door behind them. I was alone with him. The silence stretched between us, thick enough to choke on. "You're reading my documents," he stated finally. Not a question. "No, sir," I lied instinctively, then immediately regretted it as his eyebrow arched slightly. I saw them on the floor and was picking them up. I didn't mean to—" "Your name?" he interrupted. "Elena Russo." "You're new." "3 months, sir." He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. His cologne enveloped me, sandalwood and something darker, more primal. He reached past me, his sleeve brushing my arm, and picked up the damp papers. I noticed his hands, strong, with long fingers and perfectly manicured nails. A heavy gold signet ring adorned his right hand. "Do you know what these are, Elena Russo?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. I shook my head, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Your father is Michael Russo," he continued, his eyes never leaving my face. "Admitted to Massachusetts General 4 months ago. Congestive heart failure." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "How do you—" "I know everyone who works for me." He set the papers down and circled around me, like a predator sizing up prey. "Everyone who lives under my roof." "I didn't steal anything," I blurted out. Mrs. Petrov mentioned missing cufflinks, but I would never— A flicker of something crossed his face. Amusement, perhaps. "I'm not concerned about cufflinks, Elena." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed over his chest. "The tailored suit he wore probably cost more than I made in a year. Your father's medical bills, they're substantial." It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. I was struggling to breathe, my uniform suddenly too tight, too hot. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice dropping lower. "What I do?" Of course I knew. Everyone in Boston knew the Ricci family name, whispered it with a mixture of fear and respect. But the official story was that he was a businessman, an investor, a philanthropist even, with donations to hospitals and schools across the city. "You're my employer," I said carefully. The corner of his mouth twitched. "I'm much more than that." He picked up a pen from his desk, turning it between his fingers. "Tell me, Elena, why did you take this job?" "I needed the money, for my father. There are easier ways to make money. Not legal ones. Not for someone like me." The words escaped before I could stop them. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "No," he finally agreed. "Not for someone like you." He reached out suddenly and I flinched. But he only tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his touch feather light. "Your father's doctor, Cardelli. He works for me." My breath caught. "What?" "Many people in this city work for me, whether they know it or not." His hand lingered near my face, not quite touching. "Your father's treatment has been adjusted. Did you notice? The private room, the specialist consultations, the experimental treatment that had been suddenly available." My mouth went dry. "Why?" I whispered. "I was curious about you." He said it so simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to manipulate someone's medical care out of curiosity. "You're different from the others. You see things, notice things." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I don't understand." "No," he agreed, "not yet." He straightened and buttoned his suit jacket. "You'll be moving to the East Wing tomorrow. Pack your things." "The East Wing?" That was where the family quarters were located, where no staff except the most senior were allowed. "You'll be attending to me personally from now on," he said, already moving toward the door. "Mrs. Petrov will be informed." "But I'm not qualified. I've never been a personal attendant." He paused at the door, looking back at me over his shoulder. Those dark eyes seemed to see right through me, past the uniform, past the careful facade I'd constructed. "You're exactly what I need, Elena Russo. Don't be late." After he left, I stood motionless in the center of the study, the scent of whiskey and cologne still hanging in the air. My future had just been rewritten by a man who collected people like others collected art, valuable assets to be displayed or hidden away at his pleasure. The grandfather clock chimed 4 times, startling me back to reality. I had to call my father to verify he was all right. But as I reached for my phone, I noticed something on the desk that hadn't been there before, a small key with an ornate handle. Next to it was a note in elegant handwriting. East Wing, Suite 3. Midnight. I picked up the key with trembling fingers, its weight disproportionate to its size. Something told me that once I used it, there would be no going back to the invisible girl who polished marble and folded laundry. Outside the study windows, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a storm. I slipped the key into my pocket and continued cleaning, trying to ignore the feeling that I too was being polished and prepared, made ready for a purpose I couldn't yet see. The east wing of the Ricci mansion was like stepping into another world. While the staff quarters in the west wing were functional and plain, everything here spoke of opulence and power. The hallways were wider, the ceilings higher, the artwork on the walls original rather than reproductions. Even the air felt different, heavier somehow, charged with secrets. Mrs. Petrov had been speechless when Mr. Ricci's head of security, a granite-faced man called Dante, had informed her of my promotion. Her thin lips had pressed into an even thinner line as she helped me gather my few belongings. "Be careful, girl," she'd whispered when Dante stepped away. "Mr. Ricci doesn't take personal attendance. Not ever." The worry in her eyes had been genuine, and it frightened me more than any threat could have. Now, as I stood in the suite that would be my new quarters, I understood her concern. This wasn't a servant's room. It was a luxurious bedroom with an adjoining sitting area and private bathroom. A king-sized 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in midnight blue silk that shimmered in the lamplight. The windows overlooked the estate's manicured gardens, now silvered by moonlight. My few possessions looked pathetic when I set them on the marble-topped dresser. A hairbrush, a dog-eared paperback, a framed photo of my parents from before my mother's death. I placed my phone beside them and checked the time. 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes until midnight. I'd spent the evening in a daze, mechanically unpacking and then pacing the room. I'd called my father at the hospital, relieved to hear his voice, stronger than it had been in weeks. He'd sounded almost like his old self, before the heart attack that had stolen his vitality. When I'd asked about his new treatments, he'd been enthusiastically positive. "The doctor says I'm making remarkable progress," he'd told me. A miracle case, he called it. A miracle with Vittorio Ricci's fingerprints all over it. I changed out of my uniform and into the only decent clothes I owned, black jeans and a simple blue sweater. As I brushed out my hair, letting it fall loose around my shoulders instead of in its usual severe bun, I hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. 3 months of working in this house had hollowed out my cheeks and darkened the circles under my eyes. But there was something else there now, too. A wariness. A hardness that hadn't been there before. At 11:58, I took the key from my pocket and left my room. The hallway was dimly lit and silent. I moved quietly, following the numbering on the doors until I reached Suite 3. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the heavy door swung open without a sound. The room beyond was dark except for a single lamp burning on a side table. It illuminated what appeared to be a private study, smaller than the main one downstairs but no less imposing. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, while another featured a large fireplace with dying embers glowing in the grate. A leather sofa and 2 armchairs were arranged in front of it. "Close the door." The voice came from the shadows beyond the lamp's reach. I did as instructed, my fingers fumbling with the key as I locked it behind me. Vittorio Ricci emerged from the darkness, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He'd removed his suit jacket and tie, and the top buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin and a gold chain. He looked more dangerous in this state of partial undress than he had fully clothed. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the armchairs. I perched on the edge, my back straight, hands folded in my lap. He took the seat across from me, studying me over the rim of his glass as he took a sip. "Do you know why you're here, Elena?" "No," I answered honestly. "You're here because you saw something you weren't supposed to see, and because you lied about it." He set his glass down. "I don't tolerate liars in my household." Fear coiled in my stomach. "Are you going to fire me?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "If that's what I wanted, You'd already be gone. Then what do you want from me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. In the firelight, his eyes looked almost red. I want your loyalty. You already have it. I work for you. No, you work for a paycheck. That's not loyalty. He reached for a folder on the side table and opened it. Inside were photographs, me visiting my father at the hospital, me walking to the bus stop, me having coffee with my friend Sarah weeks ago. How long have you been watching me? My voice shook despite my efforts to control it. Long enough to know you're perfect for what I need. He closed the folder. There's a rat in my organization, Elena. Someone close to me is feeding information to the Cardelli family. My mind flashed to the document I'd seen. Cardelli, the same name as my father's doctor. You mean Antonio Cardelli, the head of the family that controls North Boston. His face hardened. He's trying to move into my territory and someone is helping him. The reality of who Vittorio Ricci was crashed over me like a wave. Not just a businessman with shady connections, a mafia boss, engaged in a war I'd stumbled into blindly. What does this have to do with me? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. You're invisible to them. The help. Background noise. He waved a dismissive hand. They'll talk in front of you. Let things slip. But you'll be listening for me. You want me to spy for you. It wasn't a question. I want you to be my eyes and ears where I can't be. He picked up his drink again. Starting tomorrow, you'll accompany me everywhere as my personal assistant. You'll be in every meeting, every dinner, every negotiation. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Your father's treatment is quite expensive. Experimental procedures rarely covered by insurance. It would be a shame if something interrupted it. The threat hung in the air between us, all the more terrifying for how calmly it was delivered. Why me? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You must have dozens of people you trust more. That's precisely the problem. Everyone expects me to use people I trust. He stood and moved to a cabinet, refilling his glass. No one will suspect the maid. And what happens when you find your rat? He turned to face me, leaning against the cabinet. That's not your concern, but it was. Whatever Vittorio Ricci did with the information I provided would be partly my responsibility. Blood would be on my hands too. I need to think about it, I said. He laughed then, a sound so unexpected it made me jump. No, Elena, you don't. He crossed the room and stood directly in front of me, forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. You made your decision the moment you took that key. He reached down and took my hand, pulling me to my feet. We stood so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the whiskey on his breath. Your father will receive the best care money can buy. Your outstanding student loans will disappear. And when this is over, if you've served me well, you'll never have to worry about money again. His fingers brushed my cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear just as he had in his study. All you have to do is stay close to me and listen. And report everything I hear. Everything, he confirmed. I should have been repulsed. Should have found the strength to walk away, consequences be damned. But there was something in the intensity of his gaze that held me captive, something beyond fear that made my pulse quicken. When do I start? I asked, my voice barely audible. His smile was slow and victorious. You already have. He stepped away, breaking the spell. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., wear this. He handed me a garment bag that had been hanging by the door. You're no longer staff, Elena. You're an extension of me now. You'll dress accordingly. I took the bag, feeling the weight of expensive fabric within. One last thing. He moved to his desk and withdrew a small black box. When he opened it, a delicate gold necklace nestled on velvet, a small diamond pendant catching the light. A gift to mark our new arrangement. Before I could protest, he was behind me, his fingers brushing the nape of my neck as he fastened the clasp. The pendant rested just below my collarbone, cool against my skin. Beautiful, he murmured, his hands lingering on my shoulders. Now, everyone will know you're under my protection, or that I belong to him. The distinction felt dangerously blurred. Get some rest, he said, moving toward the door. Tomorrow will be illuminating. He unlocked the door and held it open for me, a gesture so at odds with what had just transpired that it momentarily confused me. As I passed him, he caught my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Remember, Elena, eyes open, ears sharp." His voice dropped to a whisper, "and stay close to me at all times. Some of my associates aren't as civilized as I am." I nodded, unable to find my voice. He released me, and I stepped into the hallway, the garment bag clutched to my chest like armor. "Good night, Elena Russo," he called after me, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. Sweet dreams, but my dreams that night were anything but sweet. They were filled with shadowy figures and whispered threats, blood-stained documents and golden chains that tightened around my throat. And through it all, a pair of dark eyes watched, patient and hungry. Morning arrived too quickly. I woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was until the silk sheets reminded me. The events of the previous day crashed back, and I sat up, my hand automatically reaching for the diamond pendant still around my neck. Not a dream, then. I showered and opened the garment bag Vittorio had given me. Inside was a tailored black dress, simple but clearly expensive, with a matching blazer. Classic Louboutin heels and a small leather purse completed the ensemble. Everything fit perfectly, which meant he'd known my measurements before I'd ever set foot in his private study. The thought sent a chill down my spine. At precisely 6:55 a.m., I left my room and made my way downstairs. The main foyer was already bustling with activity, security personnel checking communications devices, staff preparing for the day. Several glanced my way, their expressions ranging from surprise to suspicion. I was no longer one of them. "Ms. Russo." Dante, the head of security, approached me. His face betrayed no emotion, but I sensed his assessment in the way his eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Mr. Ricci is waiting in the car." He escorted me outside, where a sleek black Bentley idled in the circular driveway. A driver stood beside it, opening the rear door as we approached. Inside, Vittorio Ricci sat reviewing documents on a tablet. He looked up as I slid in beside him, his eyes flickering over my transformation with approval. "You clean up well," he remarked, returning to his tablet. "Thank you," I replied, uncertain how to navigate this new dynamic. "Today we have meetings with 3 of my captains, followed by lunch with Commissioner Hayes." He spoke without looking up. "I've had your background adjusted. As far as anyone is concerned, you've been my executive assistant for the past year, recently relocated from my Miami office." Miami? I've never even been to Florida. Now he did look at me, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Then we should work on your tan." He returned to his tablet. "There's a dossier in the compartment beside you. Memorize it before we reach downtown." The dossier contained profiles of everyone we would meet that day. Names, relationships, business interests, personal weaknesses. It read like something from a spy novel, not the life I had stumbled into. By the time the Bentley glided to a stop outside a nondescript building in the financial district, I had committed most of it to memory. "Ready?" Vittorio asked, watching me tuck the dossier away. I nodded, though I felt anything but ready. He must have sensed my nervousness because he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Remember, you belong at my side now. Act like it." The confidence in his voice steadied me. I straightened my shoulders and followed him out of the car, conscious of the way the security detail immediately formed a protective circle around us. Dante walked ahead, another guard behind, while 2 more flanked us. Their vigilance made me realize just how dangerous Vittorio's world truly was. Inside, the building's plain exterior gave way to an opulent private club. Dark wood paneling and leather furniture created an atmosphere of old-world luxury. A host greeted Vittorio with a deferential bow. "Mr. Ricci, your usual room is prepared." As we moved through the club, conversations hushed and heads turned. I felt eyes tracking our movement, curious, assessing, some openly hostile. I kept my gaze forward, my expression neutral, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. The private room was at the back, a spacious area with a large table and views of the harbor. 3 men rose as we entered. The first, a silver-haired gentleman with a meticulously trimmed beard, I recognized from the dossier as Marco Vannucci, Vittorio's consigliere and oldest ally. The second was younger, maybe in his 30s, with sharp features and calculating eyes. Luca Salvatore, who handled the family's legitimate businesses. The third was built like a boxer, his expensive suit straining across broad shoulders. Dominic Russo, no relation to me, responsible for security operations, a euphemism I didn't want to explore further. "Gentlemen," Vittorio greeted them, gesturing for everyone to sit. "I believe you haven't met my assistant, Elena." Their eyes turned to me, assessing in different ways. Marco's gaze was thoughtful, Luca's dismissive, but it was Dominic's openly appreciative look that made me uncomfortable. "A new face," Marco commented. "From Miami, yes? Elena has been invaluable there," Vittorio replied smoothly. "I decided it was time to bring her into our Boston operations. Pretty upgrade from the last one," Dominic remarked with a smirk. Vittorio's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. "Elena will be taking notes today," he said, his tone making it clear the subject of my appearance was closed. I opened the leather portfolio I'd been provided and prepared to write, though I knew the real purpose was to listen for inconsistencies, for hints of betrayal. The meeting proceeded, a discussion of territory disputes, profit margins, and distribution channels thinly veiled as legitimate business concerns. I wrote diligently, noting who spoke, what they said, and, more importantly, what they didn't say. Luca seemed particularly evasive about a warehouse operation in South Boston, while Dominic was unusually interested in the schedule for a shipment coming in next week. When the conversation turned to the Cardelli family, I felt Vittorio's attention sharpen beside me. "They're getting bolder," Dominic reported. "Two of our collection guys were approached last week, offered double their salary to switch sides." "Did they accept?" Vittorio asked, his voice dangerously soft. "No," Dominic assured him quickly. "They reported it immediately." "And what message did you send in return?" "A clear one." Dominic's smile didn't reach his eyes. "They won't be recruiting from our ranks again anytime soon." Marco cleared his throat. "There's another matter. The Cardelli boy, Michael. He's been seen at Veluto's." Vittorio's eyebrow rose slightly. Veluto's was his favorite restaurant, a fact noted in the dossier. "Coincidence?" he asked. Marco shook his head. "3 times in the past 2 weeks. Always when you have a reservation, though you've canceled the last 2. "So they're watching me?" Vittorio mused, seemingly unconcerned. "Or someone is telling them my schedule." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. No one spoke for a moment, each man suddenly very interested in their drinks. "Increase security," Vittorio finally said. "Change my reservations last minute. And find out who's talking." The meeting continued, but the easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a tension that lingered until Vittorio finally stood, signaling the end of the discussion. As the men filed out, he placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that might have appeared casual, but effectively kept me from leaving with them. When the door closed, he turned to me. "Observations?" I hesitated, organizing my thoughts. Luca seemed nervous about the South Boston warehouse, and Dominic was too interested in next week's shipment. A smile touched his lips. "Good. What else?" "Marco is worried about you. Not just professionally. Marco has been with my family since before I was born," Vittorio confirmed. "He was my father's right hand before he became mine. And Dominic doesn't like that I'm here. He was sending you a message with that comment about an upgrade." Vittorio's eyes darkened. "Dominic often forgets his place." He moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water, handing one to me. His fingers brushed mine deliberately, and I felt a jolt of something that wasn't entirely fear. "You did well," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it before. "Natural. They have no idea what you're really doing." "What am I really doing, Vittorio?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, his first name falling from my lips without permission. He didn't seem to mind. In fact, something like pleasure flickered across his face. "You're helping me protect what's mine." He took my glass and set it aside with his own. "And soon, you'll help me expand it." Our next meeting was at a construction site, a luxury high-rise development that served as one of the Ricci family's legitimate investments. The foreman practically tripped over himself to greet Vittorio, leading us through the half-finished building with nervous energy. "We're on schedule, Mr. Ricci." The foundation issues on the east side have been resolved, and the structural work is ahead of schedule. Vittorio nodded, asking occasional questions that demonstrated a surprising knowledge of construction. I stayed close behind him, noting how workers straightened as we passed, how conversations halted mid-sentence. As we toured the upper floors, still open to the elements with breathtaking views of the city, Vittorio pulled me aside while the foreman conferred with an engineer. "What do you see?" he asked quietly. I scanned the site. They're using different materials than what's in the plans. I'd noticed the discrepancy in the blueprints the foreman had shown us versus the actual construction. Vittorio's eyes gleamed with approval. "Very good, Elena." He turned to the foreman, his voice hardening. "Mr. Foster, a word." What followed was a masterclass in controlled intimidation. Without raising his voice or making a single explicit threat, Vittorio reduced the foreman to a stammering, sweating mess, extracting a confession about kickbacks from subcontractors for using cheaper materials. "You have until tomorrow to fix this," Vittorio concluded, his tone conversational, but his eyes cold. "Or I'll fix you." In the elevator down, I stood closer to Vittorio than necessary, unnerved by what I'd witnessed. "You're afraid of me now," he observed, not looking at me. "Should I be?" His eyes met mine in the mirrored walls of the elevator. "That depends on whether you're loyal." "I don't have a choice, do I? We all have choices, Elena." The elevator reached the ground floor, and he placed his hand at the small of my back again as the doors opened. "It's the consequences we can't escape." Lunch with Commissioner Hayes was at an exclusive club overlooking the harbor. The police commissioner was a florid-faced man with the forced joviality of someone who had compromised his principles so long ago, he barely remembered having them. He greeted Vittorio like an old friend, his eyes lingering on me with undisguised interest. "And who is this lovely addition to your staff, Vittorio?" "Elena Russo, my executive assistant," Vittorio replied, his hand once again finding the small of my back. There was something possessive in the gesture that hadn't been there before. "Elena, Commissioner Hayes oversees Boston's finest." "A pleasure, Ms. Russo," Hayes said, taking my hand and holding it a moment too long. "Likewise, Commissioner," I replied, keeping my expression professional despite my discomfort. Throughout lunch, I observed the carefully choreographed dance between the two men, Hayes accepting what was clearly an envelope of cash disguised as a campaign contribution, Vittorio inquiring about specific investigations as if he were merely a concerned citizen. The corruption was so blatant it was almost disappointing. "One more thing," Vittorio said as dessert was served. "There's been some troubling activity in the North End. The Cardelli organization." Hayes's expression flickered. "I haven't heard anything." "No?" Vittorio sipped his espresso. "That's curious. My sources tell me they're expanding aggressively, moving product through the docks your officers patrol." The commissioner shifted in his seat. "I'll look into it personally." "Please do." Vittorio's tone was pleasant, but his eyes were arctic. I'd hate to think my contributions were being divided among competing interests. After Hayes left, visibly rattled, Vittorio turned to me. "What did you notice?" "He knew about the Cardellis," I said immediately. "He was lying." Vittorio nodded, looking pleased. "The commissioner has been on my payroll for 8 years, but lately his loyalty has become flexible." "You think he's the one feeding information to the Cardellis? Perhaps. Or he knows who is." He checked his watch. "One more stop before we return home." The final meeting of the day was at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, the very territory controlled by the Cardelli family. I tensed as we entered, noting how Dante and the security team seemed on high alert. "Is this safe?" I whispered to Vittorio. His hand squeezed my waist lightly. No one would dare touch me in broad daylight. A dangerous smile played at his lips. Besides, sometimes it's good to remind your enemies you're not afraid to walk in their backyard. The restaurant owner greeted Vittorio effusively, kissing both his cheeks and leading us to a private room in the back. There, a middle-aged woman waited, elegant in a simple black dress, her dark hair streaked with silver. "Vittorio," she said, rising to embrace him. "It's been too long." "Isabella." He returned her embrace warmly. "You look well." She turned to me, curiosity in her sharp eyes. "And who is this?" "Elena Russo, my new assistant," Vittorio replied. "Elena, this is Isabella Cardelli, Antonio's sister." My blood froze. We were meeting with the enemy, with the sister of the man Vittorio had described as trying to take over his territory. I struggled to keep my expression neutral as Isabella assessed me with calculating eyes. "Russo," she repeated. "Any relation to the Russos of Providence?" "No," I replied, finding my voice. "My family isn't connected." She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone is connected in some way, dear." Over a meal of exquisite pasta and wine I barely tasted, I watched the strange dance between Vittorio and Isabella. They spoke of neutral topics: art exhibitions, mutual acquaintances, reminiscences of times past, while underneath ran currents of something deeper and more dangerous. "Antonio asks after you," Isabella mentioned casually as dessert was served. "Does he?" Vittorio's tone was equally casual. "You can tell my old friend I'm in excellent health." "He'll be pleased to hear it." She sipped her wine. "He's always admired your resilience. And I've always admired his ambition. Misplaced though it often is." Their eyes met in what seemed like a silent battle of wills. I held my breath, feeling like I was watching two predators circle each other. "Such a shame we can't all be friends again," Isabella finally said, breaking the tension. "Like in the old days." The old days are gone, Isabella." Vittorio's voice was soft but firm. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned." As we prepared to leave, Isabella took my hand in both of hers. "Take care, Elena Russo," she said, her grip surprisingly strong. "Working so closely with Vittorio can be hazardous to one's health." "I'll keep that in mind," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Outside, twilight was falling over the city, casting long shadows between buildings. As we walked to the car, I felt Vittorio's hand at my back again, more protective than possessive now. "Why did we meet her?" I asked once we were safely inside the Bentley. "She's the enemy's sister. Keep your friends close, Elena," he replied, looking out at the darkening streets. "And your enemy's close enough to kiss." The car pulled away from the curb, carrying us back toward the mansion that had become both my prison and my protection. In less than 24 hours, my world had transformed completely. I had entered Vittorio Ricci's inner circle, seen the corruption and power that fueled his empire, and somehow remained standing. But as I watched his profile in the fading light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only glimpsed the surface of the dangerous game I was now playing, and that the most treacherous current still lay ahead. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, private dinners, and clandestine encounters that gave me an increasingly clear picture of Vittorio Ricci's empire. By day, I stood at his side, the perfect assistant, efficient, observant, and always one step ahead of his needs. By night, I reported everything I had seen and heard, watching as he pieced together the puzzle of betrayal with cold precision. I learned that Vittorio's organization extended far beyond Boston, with interests in New York, Miami, and even overseas. I learned that his legitimate businesses, real estate, import-export, construction, generated almost as much revenue as his illicit operations. And I learned that the war with the Cardelli family had deeper roots than simple territorial disputes. "Antonio and I grew up together," Vittorio told me one evening as we sat in his private study. The hour was late, and he had loosened his tie, a glass of whiskey in hand. Our fathers were allies, then partners, then enemies. History repeating itself. "What happened?" I asked, emboldened by the quiet intimacy that had begun to develop between us during these late-night debriefings. A shadow crossed his face. Antonio's sister, Isabella, the woman we met. She and I were engaged once. The revelation startled me. "You were going to marry into the Cardelli family?" "It was arranged by our fathers. A merger of empires." His eyes were distant, focused on memories. "But Antonio was jealous. He always wanted what I had. When I took over after my father's death, he couldn't stand that I outranked him. So he poisoned the relationship, spread rumors about me to Isabella, about Isabella to me, and the engagement ended, in blood, Vittorio confirmed, his voice hardening. My younger brother confronted Antonio. They argued. My brother ended up dead in the harbor. I gasped softly. Did Antonio... He denied it. Isabella believed him. Vittorio drained his glass. 2 months later, Antonio's right-hand man was found in a similar condition. The families have been at war ever since. And Isabella, she still talks to you? Family is complicated in our world, Elena. He set his glass down and leaned forward. Isabella plays both sides, always has. She's loyal to her blood, but she and her brother don't always agree on methods. The complexity of these relationships made my head spin. Alliances formed and broken over decades, resentments nurtured like precious heirlooms, violence always simmering just below the surface. I think I'm getting closer to identifying our problem, Vittorio said, changing the subject. Thanks to you. I had become adept at watching for patterns, for inconsistencies in what people said versus what they did. Dominic's overenthusiastic reports of dealing with the Cardelli encroachment, Commissioner Hayes's nervous evasions, Luca's unexplained disappearances during critical meetings. You think it's one of your captains? I stated, rather than asked. I know it is. He rose and moved to stand by the window, looking out at the moonlit grounds. The question is which one, and how to draw them out. He turned to face me, his expression calculating. I've been thinking about that. We need to set a trap. What kind of trap? We'll feed different information to different people. See which version reaches the Cardellis. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving mine. But for this to work, we need to give them something significant, something they can't ignore. Like what? Like me. His voice dropped lower, or more specifically, like you. A chill ran through me. I don't understand. He sat on the edge of his desk, directly in front of my chair. From now on, Elena, you and I will be more than employer and assistant in the eyes of my organization. Much more. Understanding dawned. You want people to think we're involved, intimately. He reached out and traced a finger along the diamond pendant I still wore. It's already being whispered. Your sudden appearance, your closeness to me. This necklace. My pulse quickened at his touch. And how does this help catch the traitor? Antonio Cardelli has one significant weakness. He's obsessed with taking what belongs to me. A dangerous smile played at Vittorio's lips. If he believes you're important to me, truly important, he'll want you for himself. And our rat will tell him everything about you, trying to give him an advantage. You're using me as bait, I said. A statement rather than a question. I'm elevating your position. His hand moved from the pendant to cup my cheek. You'll be safer this way. No one will dare touch what belongs to Vittorio Ricci. There it was again. That sense of ownership, of possession. I should have been repulsed, should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, craving it in a way that terrified me. Do I have a choice? I whispered. His thumb brushed across my lower lip. You always have a choice, Elena. But I think you've already made it. The next day marked the beginning of my new role. Vittorio's hand remained at the small of my back wherever we went, but now his touch was more obvious, more proprietary. He pulled out my chair at meetings, let his fingers linger on mine when passing documents, spoke to me in low, intimate tones that others couldn't hear but could certainly observe. The reactions were immediate and varied. Marco watched with paternal concern, Luca with calculating assessment, and Dominic with poorly disguised jealousy. Word spread through the organization like wildfire. The boss had taken a lover, and not just any lover, but his mysterious new assistant with no connections to the family business. They're talking, Dante informed Vittorio as we returned to the mansion after a particularly public display at one of Vittorio's clubs. Every captain, every soldier, every associate. Good, Vittorio replied. Let them talk. In private, our relationship remained professional, though the line was blurring with each passing day. Our late-night strategy sessions grew longer, more personal. I found myself sharing stories about my childhood, about my mother's death from cancer when I was 15, about my father's struggle to raise me alone while working 2 jobs. And Vittorio, to my surprise, shared in return tales of a strict father who demanded perfection, of learning the family business from the ground up, of the brother he had lost and still mourned. "You're not what I expected," I admitted one night. "What did you expect?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Someone colder, less human." He laughed, the sound warming the space between us. "Monsters are still men, Elena. We bleed, we hunger, we desire." His eyes held mine. "We're just more honest about it." A week into our charade, the trap was baited further when Vittorio announced a gathering at the mansion, a celebration of a successful real estate acquisition that had expanded the family's legitimate holdings. Everyone would be there. Captains, associates, politicians, even friendly competitors. "This will be our best opportunity," he told me as his personal tailor fitted me for a gown for the occasion. "Whoever is feeding information to the Cardellis will be watching us closely, looking for any detail that might be valuable." The night of the party arrived, and I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The gown Vittorio had chosen was a deep burgundy, form-fitting and elegant, with a daring back that left most of my skin exposed. The diamond pendant he'd given me was joined by matching earrings, another gift to solidify the illusion of our relationship. When I descended the grand staircase to the foyer where Vittorio waited, the look in his eyes made me wonder how much of this was still an act. "Magnificent," he murmured, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. The mansion's ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over the assembled guests. I recognized many faces from our meetings and encounters over the past weeks, along with politicians, judges, and business leaders whose support Vittorio had purchased one way or another. As we circulated through the crowd, Vittorio kept me close, his hand a constant presence at my waist. He introduced me not as his assistant, but simply as Elena, his tone making it clear that no further explanation was needed. I felt the weight of stares following us, some curious, some envious, some openly hostile. Dominic, in particular, watched from across the room, his expression darkening each time Vittorio's hand slipped lower on my back, or his lips brushed my ear. "He's seething," I whispered to Vittorio during a momentary reprieve. "Dominic has always wanted what he can't have," Vittorio replied, his breath warm against my skin. "It makes him predictable." As the evening progressed, the charade became increasingly difficult to maintain, not because I couldn't play my part, but because I was no longer certain how much of it was an act. The way Vittorio looked at me, touched me, spoke to me seemed to transcend our arrangement, awakening feelings I had fought to suppress since that first day in his study. We were dancing, his hand splayed possessively across my bare back, when he suddenly stiffened. Following his gaze, I saw Isabella Cardelli entering the ballroom, resplendent in silver, her arm linked with Commissioner Hayes's. "I didn't invite her," Vittorio murmured, his grip on me tightening. "She came with Hayes," I observed. "That seems significant." His eyes narrowed. "Very." We continued dancing, but Vittorio's attention was now divided, tracking Isabella as she moved through the crowd. When the music ended, he guided me toward a less crowded area of the ballroom. "Stay here," he instructed. "I need to have a word with our unexpected guest." "Is that wise?" His smile was predatory. Wisdom has little to do with it. I watched as he approached Isabella, noting how conversations hushed as he passed. They exchanged what appeared to be pleasantries, though the tension in Vittorio's shoulders told a different story. So focused was I on their interaction that I didn't notice Dominic approaching until he was beside me, a champagne flute extended in offering. "You look thirsty," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. I accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Thank you." "Quite the rapid promotion," he remarked, his gaze traveling over me in a way that made my skin crawl, from folding the boss's shirts to warming his bed. "You must have special talents." I met his gaze coolly. Mr. Ricci values loyalty above all, something not everyone understands. His expression hardened. "I've been loyal to this family for 15 years. Where were you before 3 months ago?" "Nobody, nothing." "And yet here I am," I replied. the diamond at my throat catching the light as I tilted my chin up. By his side, Dominic stepped closer, invading my space. For now. But Vittorio tires of his toys eventually. And when he does, his finger traced the line of my necklace, a grotesque mimicry of Vittorio's touch. Perhaps you'll find new employment. I took a deliberate step back from Dominic's touch, my heart hammering. I should return to Vittorio. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with bruising force. He's busy catching up with an old flame. Why not get to know the family a little better? Before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Remove your hand from what belongs to me, Dominic. Vittorio's voice was soft, almost conversational, but the threat within it was unmistakable. Dominic released me immediately, a forced smile replacing his predatory expression. Just keeping Ms. Russo company while you were occupied, boss. Your attention is neither required nor welcome. Vittorio's arm slid around my waist, pulling me against his side. In fact, I believe you have duties elsewhere tonight. The shipment at the North Docks needs supervision. Confusion flickered across Dominic's face. The North Docks? But I thought, plans change, Vittorio interrupted. I've decided to move the schedule forward, tonight. You should leave now if you want to oversee it properly. I felt the significance of the moment, understanding what Vittorio was doing. False information, delivered directly. If Dominic was the traitor, the Cardellis would be waiting at the North Docks for a shipment that didn't exist. Of course, Dominic said after a moment's hesitation. I'll handle it personally. As he walked away, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Vittorio's arm remained around me, his body radiating tension. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low. I nodded. Just surprised. He was forward. He won't touch you again. The certainty in Vittorio's voice sent a shiver through me. Ever. For the remainder of the evening, Vittorio kept me within arm's reach, his attentiveness no longer feeling like part of our charade. When we finally retired to the privacy of the East Wing, the stress of the evening caught up with me. My hands trembled as I removed the diamond earrings. You handled Dominic well, Vittorio said, pouring us each a glass of brandy. Your instincts are good. Do you think he's the one? I asked, accepting the drink. We'll know soon enough. He loosened his tie, studying me over the rim of his glass. Dante has men watching the North Docks. If the Cardellis show up, we'll have our answer. I sipped my brandy, feeling its warmth spread through my chest. And if they don't? Then we try again. Luca received different information earlier today. And Marco, a third version. He moved closer, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture that had become familiar, almost intimate. One of them will betray their hand. The proximity, the touch, the intensity of his gaze. It all became too much. I should go, I said, setting down my glass. It's late. His hand caught mine as I turned to leave. Elena. Just my name, but the way he said it made me pause. You were magnificent tonight. Every eye in that room was on you. That was the plan, wasn't it? To attract attention. Yes. His thumb traced circles on my palm. But I didn't anticipate how it would affect me, seeing you this way, having everyone believe you're mine. The air between us grew charged, heavy with unspoken desires and dangerous possibilities. I knew I should pull away, maintain the professional boundary that was already blurring beyond recognition. Instead, I found myself swaying toward him. Vittorio. My voice was barely a whisper. His phone rang, the harsh electronic sound shattering the moment. He released my hand to answer it, his expression instantly shifting from desire to calculated interest. Speak, he commanded. As he listened, his eyes found mine again, a cold smile spreading across his face. Interesting. Keep watching. Report any changes. He ended the call and set the phone aside. The Cardellis just arrived at the North Docks with a full crew. Seems Dominic passed along our little fiction. Relief and vindication washed through me. So he's the traitor. It appears so. Vittorio's expression was predatory now. Satisfaction mingled with anticipation. But let's be certain. We need to catch him in the act. Undeniable proof. How? We'll feed him one final piece of information. Something so valuable the Cardellis won't be able to resist. He moved to his desk and withdrew a leather portfolio. The complete list of our distribution network, transport routes, and security protocols. The crown jewels of our operation. My eyes widened. You'd risk that? It's a fake, of course, but convincing enough. He handed me the portfolio. Tomorrow morning, you'll take this to the safe in my downtown office. Make sure Dominic sees you doing it. Let him overhear you telling me it's been secured. What if he tries to take it himself? Vittorio's smile was cold. That's exactly what we want him to do. The next day, I followed Vittorio's plan precisely. Dressed in another impeccable outfit, I carried the portfolio conspicuously through the downtown office where Dominic was meeting with security personnel. I made a point of entering the code to Vittorio's private safe, placing the portfolio inside with deliberate care. When Dominic approached me afterward, his manner was overly casual. Important documents? I gave him a cool smile. Mr. Ricci values my discretion regarding his business affairs. Of course. His eyes flickered to the safe and back. Just making conversation. That evening, I reported the exchange to Vittorio. He was definitely interested. Good. Vittorio checked his watch. The office will be mostly empty by now. Let's see if our fish takes the bait. In Vittorio's private security room, we watched live camera feeds from the downtown office. 2 hours passed with nothing of note. I was beginning to think we had misjudged when a figure appeared on the screen, moving furtively through the darkened hallways. Dominic? Vittorio confirmed, leaning forward. We watched as he entered Vittorio's office, went directly to the safe, and entered the code. The same code I had deliberately used in his presence. The safe swung open, and Dominic quickly located the portfolio, flipping through its contents with evident satisfaction before tucking it into his jacket. We have him, Vittorio said, his voice deadly soft. What happens now? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Now? He turned to me, his eyes dark with promised violence. Now we close the trap. What followed was a blur of activity. Security teams were mobilized, orders given in terse, efficient commands. I remained by Vittorio's side, watching as he orchestrated Dominic's downfall with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. He's heading east on the turnpike, reported one of the security team, tracking Dominic's car. Looks like he's heading for the Cardelli territory. Let him deliver the package, Vittorio instructed. I want Antonio to receive it personally, then bring them both to the warehouse. I felt sick with the knowledge of what was coming, yet I couldn't bring myself to object. This was the world I had entered, the price of my father's health and my own safety. Clean hands were a luxury I could no longer afford. Hours later, Vittorio's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then simply said, "Good. Prepare them for my arrival." He turned to me. "It's done. Dominic was caught meeting with Antonio Cardelli himself. They're both secured. What will you do to them?" I finally asked. "What must be done?" He studied my face. "This troubles you." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "Because you think I'm going to kill them." I remained silent, which was answer enough. Death is sometimes necessary in our world, Elena, but it's rarely the most effective punishment. He reached for his suit jacket. "Come with me. See for yourself." I should have refused, should have drawn a line between witnessing corruption and witnessing whatever was about to happen. Instead, I found myself in the Bentley beside him, driving to an industrial area near the harbor. The warehouse was nondescript, the kind of building no one would look at twice. Inside, it was cavernous and dimly lit. In the center of the concrete floor, 2 men knelt with their hands bound behind them, Dominic, and a man I recognized from photographs as Antonio Cardelli. Dominic's face was already bloody, one eye swollen shut. Antonio appeared untouched, but pale with fear. When they saw Vittorio approaching, Dominic's remaining eye widened in terror, while Antonio maintained a defiant glare. "Vittorio," Antonio greeted, his voice surprisingly steady. "This is beneath even you. Betrayal is beneath me," Vittorio replied calmly. "Yet here we are." He circled the kneeling men slowly, like a predator toying with cornered prey. 15 years, Dominic. 15 years of trust, of prosperity, of protection. And you sell me out for what? Money? Power? He stopped in front of his former captain. Or was it just jealousy? Dominic's gaze flickered to me, standing just behind Vittorio. She's not worth it, he spat. Whatever you think she is, she's just a maid. Trash you lifted from nothing. Vittorio's hand shot out, gripping Dominic's jaw with bruising force. She is worth 100 of you. Loyal, intelligent, and mine. He released him with a shove that sent Dominic sprawling. You never understood what makes a person valuable. He turned to Antonio. And you. Did you really think I wouldn't notice your pathetic attempts to infiltrate my organization? Did Isabella know what you were planning? Antonio's expression faltered at the mention of his sister. Leave her out of this. I intend to, Vittorio replied. In fact, by tomorrow, she'll be the head of what remains of the Cardelli family, a position you're about to vacate. I expected gunshots, knives, the violence I'd been dreading. Instead, Vittorio simply nodded to Dante, who approached with a laptop and a stack of documents. Sign, Vittorio ordered Antonio. Every page. What is this? Antonio asked, suspicion evident. The transfer of all Cardelli holdings to your sister's name, your resignation from every company board, your confession to 3 federal crimes I've selected, enough to keep you in prison for 20 years. Vittorio smiled coldly. Your life, in exchange for your empire. Antonio's face drained of color. You can't do this. I already have. Vittorio checked his watch. FBI agents are currently raiding your home with a warrant based on anonymous tips. They'll find exactly what I want them to find. The only question is whether you'll be arrested, or whether you'll be found with Dominic in the harbor. The choice was clear, and Antonio knew it. With shaking hands, he signed every document, effectively surrendering everything he had built. When it was done, Vittorio turned to Dominic. As for you, I'm more traditional with traitors. I closed my eyes, not wanting to witness what came next. But the expected gunshot never came. When I looked again, Dominic was being dragged away, still very much alive. What will happen to him? I asked, as Vittorio guided me back to the car. He'll disappear, Vittorio replied simply. His fate will serve as a reminder to anyone else who might consider betrayal. As we drove back to the mansion, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I felt exhausted but strangely at peace. The danger had passed. My father was recovering, and I had survived in a world that devoured the weak. What happens now? I asked Vittorio, as the Bentley pulled through the mansion gates. With us? He took my hand, bringing it to his lips. That depends on you, Elena. Your job is done. The threat is eliminated. You're free to go back to your old life if you wish. The thought of returning to anonymity, to struggling with bills and uncertainty, felt hollow after what I'd experienced. And if I don't wish that? I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, dark and intent. Then you stay. Not as my maid, not even as my assistant, his fingers intertwined with mine. But as the woman who stood beside me when I needed her most, the woman who proved her loyalty beyond any doubt. In that moment, I made my choice, not out of fear or necessity, but out of the undeniable truth that had been growing between us. I had glimpsed the darkness in Vittorio Ricci's world and found that I could walk through it without losing myself. I'll stay, I said, sealing my fate with 2 simple words. His smile was slow and victorious, like that first night in his study. But there was something else there now, too. Something that looked dangerously like love. Good, he murmured, drawing me closer, because I'm not ready to let you go. As his lips found mine, I understood what it truly meant to belong to someone like Vittorio Ricci. Not as possession, but as partner. Equal in a world where power was the only currency that mattered, and for the first time since stepping into his mansion, I didn't stand behind him. I stood beside him.